How was Square able to beat Amazon?
We kind of ignored them. We just kept serving our customers, ignoring the fact that the most dangerous company on the planet had already targeted us for death. Do you want to see the last Square reader ever made?
Of course.
This is the last reader made. Okay, so it fits in your microphone jack. You take your credit card, you swipe it through like that. The little white reader was designed purposely by me to not work very well. I'm actually on to another project right now.
What is it?
I'm trying to lower the cost of FDA drug trials because it costs over $100 million to test a drug. And if you follow the money, it turns out the money is not going to the physicians and the patients. There's this ecosystem of middlemen that sort of suck up the rest of the money, and it's scary how much they make. The payoff for this, if it works, is we will get hundreds more life-saving substances every year as a species. I mean, that's a big payoff.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Building something that lasts is rare. Building something that rewires an entire industry, that's almost unheard of. But that's exactly what Jim McKelvey did when he co-founded Square with Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey. The idea was sparked by a personal need. Jim is an artist, and before Square, he couldn't sell one of his own glass-blown pieces because of a payment issue. Some might let that moment go. Jim built a payments empire around it. Today, Jim and I talk about how a simple piece of hardware, the now iconic little white reader, changed how small businesses transact forever. We also unpack how Square, now known as Block, went head-to-head with Amazon and won, why Jim believes most startups don't understand what real innovation looks like, and the surprising psychology behind a piece of tech being just difficult enough to feel trustworthy. But Jim's story doesn't stop at Square. We also dive into his more recent ventures, Invisibly and Fast Trials, and we talk about what serving as an independent director at the Federal Reserve taught him about the intersection of policy and entrepreneurship. Plus, he gives his hot take on tipping culture, how Gen Z might be reshaping the future of payments, and one bold prediction about what's next in FinTech. This is Jim McKelvey's Social Currency. Jim McKelvey, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You are one of these rare people who is an artist, an inventor, and a founder that has built a company that has revolutionized the way that small businesses get paid. And I'm excited to dig into the many chapters of your career. But before we get into the bigger stuff, I want to start with a very unique story that you've shared on your blog.
Okay.
The story starts with you sharing your frustration with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I think you know where this is going. Yes.
Oh my God. All right.
Because they did not want to make time to hear your pitch for a product that you were trying to sell them. And you were convinced that they were going to love this. And you had a very unconventional way of getting them to hear your pitch. So can you share that story?
I will share it. I will not reenact it. So this is Washington, D.C. It's this big trade association, and they've been ignoring me. And I've called on them multiple times. I had this meeting that was nearby, and I thought, well, I'll give them a try. And this is probably the fourth time I've gone to their office. And I could never get past the receptionist. So this time, I noticed that the receptionist wasn't there. She and a bunch of the other women in the office were in the conference room, which you could see from the area. They were having some sort of birthday party or something. I don't know what it was. And I had a briefcase, and I was in a suit because I just called on the government. So I walked, I don't know where this came over me. I walked into the office like I own the place. And I put my briefcase on the table. And I went over to the music, which was some, like office direct. And I turned it up, up to something that had a beat. And I started cheering, taking off my top. And the girls are screaming. All right. And I've got my shirt off and I'm throwing my shirt. And then I look and, because I got my shirt off now. And I look at my watch. And I was like, oh, is it 2 a.m. or 2 p.m.? And they're like, well, it's 2 p.m. I was like, oh, shit, I've got my jobs mixed up. I said, I'm actually a salesperson. I'm here to, talk to your boss. They ran down the hall. 3 ladies grabbed this guy and dragged him physically. Like, you got to talk to this guy. He just stripped his way into the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I got the meeting with the guy. I sold him a 6-figure deal, which was great for them, great for us. But yes, I will strip my way into an account, or used to. I mean, this was a while ago.
That's
completely true.
That was single-handedly the best sales pitch story I have ever heard in my life. I think it really spoke to, I think, seeing a moment, capitalizing on that moment, and approaching it in a very different way.
I wouldn't call that a sales pitch. That was getting attention. So the first thing you have to do before you can pitch is have somebody's attention, right? So like right now, most of your listeners are not paying attention. They might be kind of listening, but some are in the bathroom, some are on, some exercise equipment, some are doing something. They're not really paying attention. Like you will only probably in an hour podcast have a couple of moments when they're actually paying attention. Same way in conversation, right? Getting that moment of attention is really difficult, but it's the first step. So I got the guy's attention. And like, he thinks I'm nuts, right? Because I just stripped my way into his office and he's probably trying to get rid of me. So what I said, and I don't remember this because it was a long time ago, what I said in the first 2 minutes had to be enough to earn me the next 10 minutes. And then from there, I can then explain what we do and then shut up. We've done this a lot with Square. Like when we pitched investors, the first thing we did, we would take their money. And this is a great way to get people's attention, especially they'd never seen anything like this. So we'd be like, "Hey, Sammi, hand me your credit card." And you and this is weird, right? Because you've never handed your credit card to a person. You've always, sort of swiped it through a machine. And then I zip it through and I take your money. And now I've got your attention because I just took your money. Oh, by the way, I'm holding your credit card. So your eyes are tracking back and forth as I'm checking. So I've now earned maybe 30 seconds to explain what we're doing and why you should pay attention for the next 5 minutes. So that was the trick. It's to get that moment of attention. If you think people are listening, they're not. Most of the time, you only have these little, parents know this, right? Okay, I got a teenager at home. He doesn't hear me at all. I mean, there these little brief moments when, the window opens and I try to jam some communication in there. I love you, son, don't do drugs, whatever. But that window closes. And if you're talking and the window's closed, you're wasting air.
Your attention on other people's attention seems to be a really potent business takeaway or focus throughout your entire career. Is that where you learned it? Or where did that come from?
I mean, it came from failure. All lessons, in my case, come from repeated failure. Like I did stuff and it didn't work. And then I finally learned that what I thought was happening, which was people listening. Like, it looks like you're listening to me right now. You're body language, and you've got your notes there, and you're nodding when I say stuff. And you might actually be listening to me right now. I'm not sure.
I am.
But I don't assume it, right? You might be going, Jesus, man, this guy's just we're gonna have to edit all this out. And I don't know what's going through your head. And I don't assume it. But there will be moments when something happens, your body language shifts, or you lean in. And there's that moment when there's a likelihood that you are actually paying attention. And I listen for those moments. And I learned to do that. And actually, the Square reader, the first Square reader, we don't use these things anymore. The little white reader was designed purposely by me to not work very well.
And I want to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. That was a good trick.
Yeah. And can you walk us through the psychology behind it of why it was designed to not work well? Because anyone who just hears that sentence thinks that's super counterintuitive.
Do you want to see the last Square reader ever made? Jack gave it to me 2 days ago.
You have it on you?
And I still, to this day, carry a phone that I'm going to use my driver's license. I don't know. Yeah. How do I'm going to cover up my...
Yes.
Yeah. 4K, man, you got to watch it. Here's the problem with the reader. This is the last reader made. This is the last one, and Jack gave it to me 2 days ago. Okay, so it fits in your microphone jack. You take your credit card, you swipe it through like that. Now, the problem with this thing is that the credit card will wobble, right, as it's reading, and that messes up the read. Unless you move it straight through, it doesn't read correctly. Now, the solution to that is very easy. You make a wide one, which I did, and we manufactured it. Because at the time I was still sort of hesitating. So I made this one, which didn't work too well, and I made a wide one, which worked perfectly. And I would test them both. And when I tested them both, the wide one always was the one that people preferred because it worked, right? But when I tested them separately, I got totally different responses. When I tested the wide one by itself, people were sort of like, okay, whatever. When I tested the small one, they were like, what the hell did you just do? What is that? I got that moment. I got that. They were leaning and they were paying attention. And I was like, oh my God, of course. They've never seen anything this small. Read a credit card. And that got their attention. So we only released the little one that didn't work very well. And what happened was amazing because, first of all, it's not that hard to use. It takes 2 or 3 minutes of practice, and then you got it. But now that you've acquired a skill, right, you've now invested and learned how to use my product. And what do you want to do? You want to show off. The first thing you want to do when you acquire a new skill is, hey, Sammi, look at this thing I can do. Like, give me your credit. I'll show you that. I got millions of people to show off their new skill and sort of advertise the Square product by making something that didn't function as well as it could have. And it was for that moment of attention. If you're trying to pitch, man, you gotta learn this stuff.
One thing that is super interesting is I understand that the decision to have this small piece initially, when you were still trying to build awareness, when people had no idea who you guys were and what you were doing. Now, flash forward however many years it's been, Square is a household name. Everyone knows about Square.
Yeah.
Yet you still have that smaller piece, even though admittedly, right, the wider one would have technically worked a little bit better. Why keep it that same size?
Well, it became our brand. It became this thing. And again, it's pretty cool. I mean, that thing's in the Museum of Modern Art. We didn't abandon it once it worked. If you're trying to communicate, people don't give enough sympathy to the listener. A lot of times, it's just boring. So the reason I rewrote my book 8 times is because every time I read it, there was some part that was boring. And I was like, I got to cut that out. And so it starts this thick and it ends up this thick. But it's that level of respect for the person who's giving you their attention or part of their attention. Most people disrespect that and they waste their time. And that's one of the things that most irks me is when somebody has my attention and then they waste it.
I think what you're saying is going to resonate with so many people. I think from my personal lens, I don't have a product company. I'm definitely not in the FinTech space by any means, but I look at everything through the lens of content. My primary platform, I obviously have this podcast. I post these business and culture videos on Instagram and TikTok. And attention is the most valuable currency. I say that all of the time. And I think everything that you're saying just rings so true, especially in today's day and age where people literally, if you don't catch their attention in 2 seconds, they will just scroll along.
We try to not devolve to something that is, purient for that attention, but it does work. Sex works. Anger works. Misinformation works. There's some things that are jarring enough to get you that attention, but that's really bad, right? So this is one of the reasons I don't use social media. So zero. I've never used a Facebook product with the exception of WhatsApp, which I kind of consider a phone product. I've never been on Instagram. I mean, Kevin's a friend. I've never been on Instagram. I've never been on Facebook. There is actually an Instagram account that claims to be me and is shockingly good. Like it fools people, but it's not me. Like there is somebody who is impersonating me really well. And they talk about the glass studio like, but you can tell, like if you listen, like I've never used the phrase, my happy place. Okay. And it's in there and I was like, but yeah, that's,
fascinating.
But it's a terrible thing that we're doing because interruption is a disaster. If you think about when people actually have meaningful thoughts, meaningfully new thoughts, they have to synthesize. There's a moment, there's a pause between and before that new thought comes out. If you interrupt, you'll never get the new thought. So one of the things you will never hear me do is interrupt. I have never done it. It's been decades since I've interrupted anyone. Unless it's like really just insane. The reason I do that and the reason I pause is because every once in a while, someone will give me their pat answer. And then I don't say anything. Then they think about it for a second. And then I get the real interesting, thoughtful, new idea. And that's been fantastic. And again, I think if we're in an interrupt-driven world, we lose those pauses.
The power pause, as it's called.
It's not I mean, I guess it's a power pause, but this is not some like negotiating strategy. Although I was with Chris Voss yesterday, who's like one of my favorite authors. Guy's awesome. And he was sitting in my office. We were talking about this stuff. He's got a brand of Tennessee whiskey now. You know, he's power pause. You know, you guy's a friggin' FBI hostage negotiator. I'm not that.
Yep.
I'm just a guy who's trying to learn. Mm-hmm. And if you interrupt, you don't learn.
I want to go back to the initial idea for Square. When I was reading about it, it seems like it's the quintessential, I have a problem and I want to find a way to solve it. But I'd love to hear from you. Can you take us back to that moment, that exact moment when you were like, oh shit, I need to build something to fix this issue?
So Jack and I had already agreed to start a company. Jack used to work for me at another tech company that I technically still have. It still makes money. But we reconnected back in 2008, 2009, decided to start a new company together, had already hired a guy who was going to be starting soon. And so we had to pick an idea, and we were kicking around ideas. And we had an idea that we'd settled on, which was sort of like a journaling thing. It wasn't too good, but it was like, well, maybe we can do journaling. I don't know what it was. I went back to my glass studio, and I was packing my stuff up to move out to California. And this lady called from Panama, actually, and she was trying to buy one of my pieces of glass. It was on some website. And it was hideously ugly and really expensive. Because one thing I learned as an artist is like, don't give away the fact that it's a garbage, piece of glass by your price. Like you can't tell what I think about a piece by my price. And I really wanted to sell this thing. And she only had an American Express card, which we don't take in our studio. And so I lost the sale because she didn't have a Visa or MasterCard. And I was very upset. And I looked at my iPhone and I thought, this device failed me just now. Because my attitude with the iPhone, when the iPhone came out, it was this magic thing that turned into whatever I wanted. So it turns into a book or a TV or a flashlight. It has to become what I want it to be. And at that moment, it wouldn't turn magically into a credit card kiosk. And therefore, I lost the sale. And so I called Jack on my iPhone and I said, hey, this is what I think we should do. We should magically turn my iPhone into a payment terminal so that I can get paid. And so that was the original idea.
Something interesting that you just said is that you and Jack had already decided that you were going to start a company together, and you were looking for the potential. Yes, you thought it would be journaling at the time,
yes,
but the mindset. I think a lot of people who are kind of in it's called like the wantrepreneur category, someone who, wants to start a business. Yes, you may be presented with an opportunity, just like you had this moment where you're like, this is really annoying that I can't make this sale. But you also, I think it's important to just really hone in on the fact that you were also very much looking for opportunities where you could truly make an impact and do something that was going to solve a problem.
Yes, although it wasn't that direct. It wasn't like I, did some sort of exercise that came, I didn't, go off in some ayahuasca tent and come out, oh, I have a vision. It wasn't any of that. I was just pissed off, right? So I think a lot of things that ultimately make good businesses are personal frustrations. So find something that's upsetting to you. Could you fix that? And is it just personally upsetting, or is it something that maybe a million other people are also similarly upset with? And so that to me is a good reason to start a business. When Jack asked me to start a business, well, first of all, he wasn't famous yet. So that was, but he was always a guy that I enjoyed working with. Like Jack Dorsey is really, I've always had fun working with him. Like he's fun. He's this weird, quiet sort of person. And, our personalities are quite different. So we get along really well. And that just seemed like a fun thing to do. But we didn't have a good idea. So you put the team together. And I'm not saying this is the formula, but we had the team together before we had the idea. And I just got fortunate. I get upset at stuff. And then sometimes they become businesses.
I want to dig into a specific instant that happened with the business that I know my listeners are going to find fascinating. So very early on in Square's building phase, a huge company came into the space and tried to essentially rip off exactly what you were doing. The company that I'm talking about is Amazon,
yes.
And they came out with something called Amazon Register.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about a David versus Goliath moment. How was Square able to beat Amazon?
So Amazon has this thing. If they want to compete with a startup, they don't buy your startup. They just steal it. And they do it with a formula that has always worked. They copy your product, undercut your price, add the Amazon brand name, and just watch you die. Like that always works. And I know it always works because, at least with a startup, Amazon has, because I studied this, because when it happened to Square, I looked for other solutions to the Amazon problem, and there were none. So what do you do when you fight Amazon? Well, you'd like to be as big as they are. You want to have their brand name. Like it would be helpful to have a listening device in everybody's home, or an army of robots or something like that. We didn't have any of that stuff. So what do you do? Well, the answer in our case was not much. There wasn't anything we really could do. So we kind of ignored them, which was crazy, but in fact turned out to be a really good strategy. We just kept serving our customers, ignoring the fact that the most dangerous company on the planet had already targeted us for death, right? And so this is actually the reason I wrote the book, was because a year after Amazon entered our market, they quit and gave us their market. Like they literally shipped a Square Reader, one of those little white things, to all their former customers. They said, we're out, use Square, done, right? Which is cool. But as soon as I got over the feeling that it was cool, I was really confused as to what had happened. Like, nobody beats Amazon. No startup beats. It just was a zero probability. And so what I did was I started looking for other examples. Well, surely it must have happened other times. And it does happen. It's just a rare case. It's not the normal thing. But I studied history and I found dozens of examples of exactly the same pattern. I was like, oh my God, this happened 1,000 years ago. Oh my God, it happened 100 years ago. Oh my God, it happened in this industry and in that. And I saw this pattern. And I was like, why have I never heard of this? Because I read a ton and I study and I listen and learn. I was like, why am I just finding out about this now? And it turns out, at least in the English language, we didn't even have a vocabulary to describe the phenomena that I'd observed. I studied it, and I got to the point where I was like, okay, now I know exactly what happened. Okay, I'm good. I'm fine. That was that. The only problem was that I had not talked to anyone who was living, because these are fairly rare examples. And the only guy that was still alive who had lived through it also was Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines. And so I called Herb. Amazingly called me back, invited me down to Dallas. And so I spent an afternoon with this guy. And Herb is a legend. So firstly, one of my heroes. Secondly, awesome guy. Hilarious. Chain smoked a bunch of, cool menthols. I mean, just a badass. All right. And when you fly into to visit Herb Kelleher, like the road is called Herb Kelleher Way that you get off at the airport. Right. And so Herb and I are having a great time. And I'm explaining how I think my little payment company is like his giant airline. And he's like, Jim, this is amazing. He's like, how are you going to share this with the world? And I should set the context here because you got to explain what's going on. I'm sitting on his couch like I'm sitting on his couch. Herb is pacing, right? He's walking around and he's smoking cool menthol. So he's laying down this like stratus layer of, nicotine. And I have got no tolerance. I don't go to bars or anything. So I'm high as hell. I'm just fucking, I'm starstruck, right? And then I'm high on nicotine. And then and I'm also Catholic, right? So, if you're raised Catholic, you know that when God talks to you, it's going to be in a male baritone voice. And the voice is going to come out of a cloud. So here's Herb. And he's like, how will you share this with the world? And I was like, oh my God. It was like God looking down at me and giving me this commandment. Thou shalt write a book. It shall not be a boring book. You must tell, so Herb wanted me to share the secret, which is how I came up with the idea of a graphic novel, which actually Herb hated. He didn't want to be portrayed that way. But that's how the innovation stack started. It was a commandment from God.
That is also yet another incredible story. First, it's incredible the way that Square was able to beat Amazon, because as you said, it doesn't happen. That
Nobody
if you look at even outside of the FinTech space, if
Yeah.
you look at all of the different categories that Amazon operates in, they just take out companies, right?
Absolutely. They're
I
phenomenal.
say this as someone who used to work at Amazon and was in Amazon fashion, which is a huge category,
Yeah,
and
so
logistics.
you
I
got
know.
a pile of skulls.
Literally, yes. But from a pricing standpoint, because they undercut you on pricing pretty significantly,
Yes, they
right?
did. 30%. It's always 30%.
I think people who are listening to the story first will just be amazed. But second, even though pricing was not comparable, they were giving businesses a discount from what your service was charging
Yes,
them.
on what was considered commodity product, which is payment processing.
Yes.
Like, there's no brand name in payment processing. Well, there is now.
Yeah, which is why, to me, it was this commodity business
Yeah.
that from a pricing standpoint, you would expect that the lowest price wins, but not the case.
Every MBA expected us to die. Look, this is why the book exists, is because in the world of derivative product and copying, there is a set of rules that we would have died under. Like, that would have absolutely been death. And that's the world we live in almost our entire lives, sometimes our entire lives. We will live in that world. You will never leave that. There is this other weird world where the rules are different. Because in the world of innovation, and I go into this in a great deal in the book, and I don't want to like bore you guys, but like, it's just different. Everything's different. Pricing is different. Brand is different. Product is different. The team is different. The way you manage the team is different. When I was interviewing with Herb Kelleher, I heard something in his voice, and he told me something. And in my book, I predicted the demise of Southwest Airlines, which I thought was really I felt it was a little insulting to Herb, but like, I felt it from him. Because, Southwest has been, it was like up, and now it's like, while it was still up, I called the down because I saw them change their rules. I saw them abandon this world where they were unassailable and move into this world where if Amazon wanted to take their business, they would take their business. And so it's a parallel universe.
Earlier, you mentioned your book, The Innovation Stack.
Yes.
I don't think we ever officially said the name.
It's called The Innovation Stack.
I want to make
Yeah.
sure people know. Just to clarify, because we've talked about how it manifests and things that companies can do to really differentiate themselves. Are you saying that any company, regardless of industry, regardless of size, I want to make sure that listeners truly know that this can apply? And I'd love to hear it from you. Do you feel, regardless of the industry, because there are some industries that people may be guessing or second guessing, thinking, I don't think that's true for my industry.
I would say that I'm not pitching some panacea here. Like, I don't think it applies most of the time. As a matter of fact, I'm saying the opposite. The rules you learn in my book, probably you'll never use in your life. Okay? You'll be fine without ever reading my book. So why would you read the thing? Okay. There will be a moment, okay, when you encounter something that you want to change, something you want to change in the world, big, little, up. And at that moment, if it's something that has never been done before, and you attempt to walk down that path, every molecule in your body will rebel against you. Like, your DNA, which is a copying machine, will literally stop you from doing things that you're supposed to do. Like, and you just, it's this very odd and uncomfortable thing. And the saddest story I heard from my book was this guy. He's uptown, lives in New York. I was in his living room. So he was a reviewer for my book. A very famous guy. Okay. Badass. All right. He's just read my book. I'm sitting in his office. I'm sitting in his living room. He has a painting. Okay. And I'm rich. Okay. But he has a painting that by itself is worth more than everything I have on the planet. Like, take everything I own and my kid, sell my everything at full retail. It is not worth what this single painting that's hanging on his wall is worth. All right. This guy's, he's fine. Don't feel sorry for him. But feel sorry for this. He said, Jim, I wish I'd read this 20 years ago. He said, if I had read this 20 years ago, because we were on this path that you described perfectly, it fit what we were doing. And it was so difficult, we quit. He said, if I had known that it was supposed to feel this way, if I had known that this was how it is, I would have kept going and I would have had this thing that we were trying to do. He walked the path, but look, it's it's brutal. And so I don't want people to quit. So the only thing the book does, it is not universally applicable. If you are, trying to come up with a new idea, it might not help, right? But if you actually do stumble upon something that is unique and that you can do for the first time, then it is your vaccine that gets you through, the first bout. It will give you at least some comfort in knowing that you are supposed to be uncomfortable.
You call it a vaccine, but I almost feel like
that's because that's unpopular. Yeah. I always do unpopular stuff. So.
You're catching attention.
Yes.
And you said I love the way that you phrase that, of how it's almost, you hope that most people don't end up using it because doing what you're suggesting is so incredibly difficult and taxing and probably the hardest thing that most people will ever attempt to do in their lives if they go down that path.
Yes, it is draining.
But it is, to me, I think, if you are someone who aspires to accomplish greatness, whatever that means to you, the book is really a framework for how to think through doing really hard things.
I think people go into entrepreneurship looking at these people who've had these 1,000x returns, right? We did 1,000x, and there are others who've 1,000x their efforts. That's all cool. Okay. The rewards are great, but that path is very difficult and nobody really describes it very well. So that's what I wanted people to know. My book is not it's not a guide book. It doesn't, it's not, do this, and then McKelvey says it'll work. It's just an explanation of what it's like so that you won't feel so out of place when it starts happening. Because your entire being has been trained to fit in with what everybody else is doing. Humans are herd animals. We group together. Even when we don't have each other, we have, pets and dogs. We have companions. We want, companionship. We want to be in the herd. That feeling when you do something that nobody else is doing, everything about, like the people who love you, this is one of the crazy things. The people who love you the most are the ones who say, Sammi, come back. Don't do that. Like, don't do that thing. Oh, you're going to hurt yourself. And when your loved ones are telling you that, it's incredibly powerful and very demotivating.
Yes. So I want to transition to something that you've done beyond Square, and we're going to get into Invisibly next. But it's something that you've done, and I've never met someone who's done this before, so this is a more rare position to hold. But you've served as an independent director of the Federal Reserve Board in St. Louis. First off, what in the world is an independent director for the Federal Reserve Board? What is that?
So the Fed has 12 regions, and each region has somewhat autonomy. It used to matter more when the country was bigger and communication was slower, but we still have these 12 regions, and they govern independently. On top of each one is a board, and then there are different directors. Most directors are bank directors, but there's also what's called an independent director. These are people who are not banks, and you eventually become the chair of the Fed. So that was my job. And actually, Herb Kelleher was also, he also ran the Dallas Fed. But I happened to catch the craziest time at the Fed. I caught the zero interest rates. When we couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, and all these economists were like, we don't really know, and we've never been here. I caught the end of QE, which for an economist is crazy because we never started unwinding this thing. Nobody knew how the math was going to work. It was totally new.
QE, the quantitative easing. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, jargon. But then it got weird. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, the FTX collapsed, the pandemic. So I got this roller coaster ride through the Fed when I kept thinking they were going to kick me out. There were two times when I, honest to God, thought, oh, I'm out of here. Right? I made a really bad joke at one of the meetings, like one of my first meetings.
What was it?
Oh, so we were sitting around whining about the fact that we couldn't hire anybody. This was when we had zero interest rates. The salaries had gone up, and we had an IT job that we couldn't fill. Market rate for the job was $3 million, and we were salary capped at $400K. All right, so we were so under market we couldn't hire anybody. And we're all kind of whining about it. And I was like, we're thinking about this wrong. We're the Federal Reserve. We can tank this economy and then hire anybody we want. And I said it without smiling. And, the room full of economists, everyone's in a suit. And thank God Lael Brainerd had a sense of humor and bust out laughing after, but it was an uncomfortable pause. It was, it was a little too, like, I don't think she got it immediately. Now, maybe she was just trying to save us, but she busted up, and then everyone laughed, and they're like, oh, Jim made a joke. Oh, why didn't you invite this guy? There were a couple of moments when they could have booted me.
What was that like? Because at the time you joined, you had been with Square for quite some time. The company had already, was this pre-IPO?
This was post-IPO, but pre with the stock, right?
I would imagine that just being in that type of role, you're getting, I don't want to say exposure, but you're having different types of conversations about the economy more broadly. Did being in that type of role shift your perspective in terms of even like private sector finance businesses, or did it give you a new perspective that you didn't have while you were on the founder side?
Oh, very much, very much. Probably the greatest perspective I got was not economic. It was social, though. Because when you join the Federal Reserve, you become politically neutral. And I was sort of, kind of lefty when I went on. And I was like, okay, enough of that. You got to get along with everybody. And, I came in under Obama, and then it was Trump. And so there was this huge shift. And during that time, I was open to everybody. And I made myself neutral. I never brought politics into anything. Not that I was that political to begin with, but I completely gave up having a political opinion. It opened my mind. Like, I've heard a lot of theory that I think I probably would have knee-jerk rejected. And so now I've got friends on both sides of the aisles. I've got a lot of Republican friends. I still have a lot of Democratic friends. And it was a mental shift, all because they require political neutrality. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody on the Fed is not a politician. And I've been in the rooms, like a lot of the rooms when stuff was going bad. Like when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and the question was, are we going to bail out and trash the banking system, or what's going to happen? I got to go to those meetings. I got the calls. Let me tell you, this is a well-run central bank. When shit hits a fan, you want these people making the decisions, and I have watched them, and they are good, and they do it for the right reasons. And I was so proud of that, and it taught me a little more humility. It was like, shut up. Don't bring your politics into the room. Don't immediately think you're right. Because I used to do that. I know how this works. I guess I still do that. But I do it less so now that I've been on the Fed. The takeaway is there is an allergic response to information that doesn't fit your mental model of the world. This is how humans filter stuff out, right? So you've got all this stuff hit you, and you go, well, that's wrong, and that's stupid. And I do this. I do it less so now. And if I meet somebody, even if they're nuts, or if I think they're nuts, I give them way more bandwidth than I would normally have. I listen to more of it. I synthesize. I try to feel like what they're feeling. And then, if I've got the energy, I sit there and say, okay, I'm going to put myself in your position and try to feel what you feel and why you feel this way. Like, why are you dug in on this position? Mm-hmm. And it's very helpful because a lot of times, again, you couple that with that pause, okay? So you're not interrupting and you're just arguing the other side. A lot of times I learned a ton. It was a great life lesson. I mean, Federal Reserve.
You heard it here. 10 out of 10 experience. You're now working, and you've been working on this company for a while, but it's very different from Square/Block.
Yeah.
And it's now in the consumer data space.
Invisibly failed. Yes. I mean,
what does that mean?
So it makes money, fine. It failed to do what its mission was. It was trying to save journalism. It was trying to save this, like the creation of quality content. Look at all these cameras. These guys in the back, you can't see them. But like, there are people working on this. They don't just send this out. This guy's going to edit it, They're going to take all this stupid stuff that I say and, cut that out. And when I'm redundant, you're like, this poor bastard has to probably pull an all-nighter. But you want to pay him. He's got to get paid somehow. So this is the world we were trying to save. Okay, because journalism to me is this ecosystem of people who create truth. And truth costs a lot. Mm-hmm. And fact-checking costs a lot. Like, I want them to have money. And so I came up with this fantastic I thought was fantastic, theoretical solution to this, which involved micropayments and all this stuff. It required this miracle, which is that we get all the content in the English language under one single license. It took us 5 years. It cost $50 million. It worked. It was amazing. And you could get anything you wanted, with the exception of The Economist and The New York Times. Those were the only two significant publications that we didn't have under, but Wall Street Journal, Washington, like everything, all the other stuff was there. Nobody wanted it. It was heartbreaking.
Why not?
I don't know. But the dog didn't eat the dog food. We gave everybody access to all content for free with no ads.
If it's free for people to access, what was the monetization piece?
So we actually were building that separately.
Okay.
That works great. So the monetization, it turns out that if you actually give somebody your attention, it's worth 100 times more than if they steal that attention. And so using that math, we were able to say, look, give us 10 seconds where you're actually paying attention. We can turn it into $1. And that $1 buys you a month's worth of content. It was an amazing business. The math on the other side, we thought it was going to be hard to earn the money. It was easy to earn the money. And we thought people would want to consume the content. They don't want it for whatever reason. And this was the heartbreaking thing. People don't want it. Make it free, make it available. They still don't want it.
But when we're talking about these publications, people are still reading. So it was Wall Street Journal, for example,
yes, it was Wall Street Journal.
So are you saying people aren't reading
If
Wall Street Journal?
If I gave you the Wall Street Journal for free, less than 8% of your readers would actually look at it.
Really?
I know. I make that same face. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. Talk about disappointing. Yeah. So Invisibly was a failure, with the exception of one thing. The monetization thing has become completely weaponized. So we do a ton of work in politics. So we have been able to figure out how to communicate with people so efficiently that we did a ton of work, mostly for the Republicans during the last election cycle. Oh my God, the Republicans are so much better than the Democrats at using tech. It's scary. The difference is profound.
Really?
Right? Oh yeah, you think the Democrats have all the nerds and stuff? No, the Republicans outgun the Democrats, and I can prove it. Like I've watched these guys. They're amazing. We've already got a bunch of politicians signed up for the next round. So, we do advertising, marketing, surveys. That was all in service of trying to get people paid so that they could, save journalism. Anyway, it didn't work. The company still exists. It makes a bunch of money. If you want to run for office, or you need to sell a product, or you need to do a survey, Invisibly's got killer tech, but the big social mission never happened. So I'm actually on to another project right now.
What is it?
I'm trying to lower the cost of FDA drug trials.
How?
I don't know.
So this is in its infancy.
This is an absolute new start. So here's the theory. We're getting all this drug discovery. AlphaFold, all these labs. We're figuring out all these molecules. What we don't do is test them properly, because it costs over $100 million to test a drug. So the question is why? And if you follow the money, it turns out the money is not going to the physicians and the patients, which are sort of a necessary part. You need somebody to take the drug, and you need somebody to watch what happens when the poor person takes their drug. Like that, they get a fraction. There's this ecosystem of middlemen that sort of suck up the rest of the money, and it's scary how much they make. And I think it needs to be rethought. So what we do is I buy drugs. I license drug assets, and then we run the trials ourselves at a tenth the cost of normal drug trials.
Wow. Who is paying you to do that?
No, I just use my own money.
Really?
Yeah. But then we have a drug, and the thing's worth $1 billion when we sell it. So, it should be self-funding. My hope is that I can do this a dozen times. So we're just starting our first drug trial next month. It's an epinephrine trial, so a replacement to the EpiPen.
Wow.
But this one's going to be affordable. This isn't going to be some $300 shot. This is going to be some really cheap, but still efficacious solution, because the EpiPens are too expensive now.
Forgive me, because I'm not well versed in this world at all. But because you're bringing down the cost of the trial, will that impact at all? And I know insurance is a whole different beast that we won't even get into, but does that impact the final price that the consumer, the user, ends up paying?
I hope it will.
Yeah.
Right now what I know is that if you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a thing that might not work, you need to earn billions of dollars in order for the investors to invest in you. So the system right now requires multi-billion-dollar payouts for any decent molecule that's going to save a life. That works, but it doesn't work at scale. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that we can knock a zero off that equation and then hopefully get 10x more substances. We only really get 30 new drugs a year as a species. And we should be getting like 1,000. But if I can get us up to 300 through a new model, I have the privilege of working on crazy problems, and I don't need to feed my family through the success of one of these organizations, so I can take big shots. Invisibly, sorry folks, I don't know how to save journalism. It didn't work. Let me know if you're running for office. I can get you that Senate seat. If you want to work, you want to go to the Senate, call me. I'm your guy, right? But if you, in this case, we're trying to just make drugs, safe drugs, real drugs, because what happens if you don't test, you don't know, and then you end up in this world where you got to go overseas to, some South American country, and they'll inject you with whatever, but you don't know if it works.
I'm sensing a trend here. You have gone after these industries that also happen to be quite highly regulated. And maybe that's also inherent. These are really hard problems to solve, right? The financial technology space is regulated. You have health. Anything in health is probably the most regulated. What would be your advice to someone who wants to solve a very hard problem in one of these more regulated industries? Because now, whatever round this is for you, now that you're tackling this incredibly hard problem, as you said, you're self-funding this.
I can be an idiot with my own money and have been many times.
But what would be your advice for someone who wants to go into one of these regulated industries? Now, you weren't in the position that you are now when you were doing Square or starting Square, but any advice since you've done this now many times in these regulated industries?
So first of all, the money doesn't help that much. Now, in the case of licensing drug assets, yes, it does. But the real work is figuring out a different way of running trials that's still scientifically valid without touching the ecosystem that needs to be earning $40,000 a patient. That's the average cost of a drug trial right now. Actually, it's $45,000 a patient. I think, frankly, Invisibly got hurt because of the money. I brought too much money to Invisibly. I didn't keep the team lean. We eventually had to fire like 80% of the company and just bring it down to a small team. And that's what got the product out the door. So I overfunded my own company. Ooh, big mistake. So look, I don't think it takes a ton of money. It's easy to say that when you've got a ton of money. But Square, we didn't have a ton of money. Jack and I self-funded it. Until then, Vinod did. But look, if you're doing something significant, you can always raise money. Like, raising money is frankly easy. And actually, in the book, I give a formula for that. Like, if you want to raise money, I think it's chapter 3. There is a formula for getting people to write you big checks. No problem. So money's not the issue. I think the trick in a regulated industry is to recognize this idea of regulatory capture, which happens because powerful companies become powerful politicians, not themselves, but they influence politics. So the company becomes this political entity, and then you write laws to favor your company. And if you look at the laws, a lot of them are designed to help the companies be more successful that are already very successful. This is called regulatory capture. So if you've got that, what you have is an industry that is almost structurally profitable. Like, you can't not make money if you get into it. The hard part is getting into it. But that's not that hard either if you've got, because, amazing technology is available everywhere now. Mm-hmm. So the barriers to entry are very, very low.
If you're able, and this is the big if you're able to figure it out, if you're able to get into the space, there is also this inherent defensibility. If you're one of the few companies that is able to crack it, there are also less players. Like, I would imagine you're probably the only company, whatever this new company's name is, we're not sure.
Fast Trials.
It's
called Fast Trials.
On the nose. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So Fast Trials, there's no one else doing it. Or
I think there are probably a dozen people trying to do what we're doing, but that's fine. I want this to be the norm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The hard part is, and this is interesting, if you've got a drug asset, you've spent, hundreds of millions of dollars getting to the point where it looks like it might work. You got your lab tests, and then your mouse tests, and then your monkey tests, and then you got a little human trial. Like you're to the point where you've got probably a 9-figure investment in this thing, and you got a shot on goal. Like it could be an approved drug. And I'll give you 2 paths. One is use the existing system, which costs a fortune, but it exists, and there are people who will fund that. And if you're lucky enough to get it all the way to the goal, great. The problem is, and this is where like everybody who comes to us has had some failure. They've got some, sort of birth defect in their lineage. There's some handicap there. Maybe they failed a trial. Maybe something happened, but they ended up unable to fund. So then they got to talk to me, and my answer is, hey man, I'll pay for your trial and I'll run it, but we'll split the money if it works. They're like, but won't you pay all my staff? And no, I'm not gonna pay your staff. But won't you, like I have all this credit card debt. Don't care. So, I mean, we're not the normal funders. We are, but we have some amazing drugs in our pipeline that I think are going to save a ton of lives, or at least improve lives. And, once the model gets proven, hopefully things will work. But again, look, I sat here 5 years ago with Invisibly equally earnestly saying this was a great idea, which I thought it was, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Fast trials might not work. I like if people like me don't take shots, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Like the payoff for this, if it works, is we will get hundreds more life-saving substances every year as a species. I mean, that's a big payoff. And if I trash some of my money that my wife and I are giving away anyway, okay, fine.
Did I see that you signed the Giving Pledge?
We're in the Giving Pledge, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's not that amazing. Like it's good, but I think you only have to give away part of it. I think you can still really mess up your kids and grandchildren. Like I think you can completely trash their lives. We're actually giving away all of it.
Wow.
Yeah, don't tell my son.
That is incredible. And I think that's just incredibly inspiring.
I mean, we'll live well. What do you do?
We're going to go into questions I ask every guest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. Can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business? And it can be a system for anything.
Don't do list. Have a don't do list. Make a list of things that waste your time. So this was not my idea. It was not. I got it from Jim Collins. He wrote Good to Great. Jim and I were at a conference when he was writing Good from Great. Tells you how long this was ago, probably 25 years ago. He told me this trick. I think he learned it from Cork Walgreen. But the idea is have a list of things that you aren't good at, shouldn't be doing, or hate, and just don't do those things. The idea being that most of us have a to-do list where we try to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn to play the violin. Right, well, where's that time going to come from? And the answer is the don't do list gives you an explicit way of eliminating things that waste your time. So on my don't do list, I don't gas cars. I bought a super, super, super efficient car when it was first available. I bought the literally first hybrid car because I've been doing this for 20 plus years. But I was like, I'm wasting time gassing cars, so I got a super efficient car. I don't do any social media. I don't consume news, which sounds contradictory because of Invisibly, but the fact is the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle, bums me out, and I can't do anything about it. It just depressed me. I don't consume. So I've got this whole list, people and things and all this stuff. The don't do list is very freeing. I don't watch TV alone. If I want to see a TV show, I have to go to a friend's house or I have to get one of my kids or something, but I do not watch TV by myself.
I like that one. That's great.
But, copy if you want, but that's one of my things, the don't do list.
My next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or story that impacts business and culture.
Oh, wow.
Recent data shows that Gen Z is less likely to tip than older generations, and they also express significant frustration with the current tipping culture. So what is your take on the current tipping culture that has permeated through seemingly every transaction nowadays? You're often prompted on Square.
Look, that was us. I mean, you got one of the two guys in the room that was responsible for that damn thing. I'm sorry. It seemed like a good idea that you could bring tipping out of, and tipping's everywhere. It's endemic. I tip it. And I remember when Jack and I were talking about that. Oh, we could have tips. And it seemed like a good idea. First of all, sorry. Secondly, I get it. All right. Because it's extra friction. Mm-hmm. It's not even the money. It's the fact that I now have to pause again and make a decision. You've used up I think you get 500 decisions a day, or there's some finite number of, decisions your brain can make. Mm-hmm. There's actually a study on this, and we used up a couple of them on the tip. My rule right now, if I'm standing, I don't tip. If I'm standing up, I don't care what it is, you're not getting a tip. If I'm sitting, then I tip. And I don't know, that's arbitrary, but it's at least the fact that I can then go to this, am I standing or am I sitting? Okay, sit, tip, stand, no.
I actually have the same. I did not know that was going to be your answer. That's
you
my
do the stand?
Yeah, that's the same thing. But for me, and I think this is actually, there are so many, I've seen so many viral pieces of commentary on this specific aspect of the tipping culture right now, is when you're at a cafe or really at any establishment where you are prompted with that, would you like a tip? And you have the person who is behind the counter. And it's like this moment where they're like looking into your eyes, and it's like, they know what's going to prompt on the screen. You know that you're going to have to choose 18%, 20%, 25%.
Where do those numbers come from too? That's horrible.
That moment is excruciating. It is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I unintended consequence. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for that. Yeah.
All good. So let's end with a listener question. So this question comes from Jake. This is a pretty big one, so I'd love to hear your take on this. What is a prediction that you have about the future of FinTech? And it can be any prediction.
This could be in that special content section that you like. And the bonus material is Jim rants for 5 minutes about FinTech. First of all, FinTech didn't exist when we started Square. There was no term for it. It wasn't this thing. So I've sort of ignored it generally. The reason it exists is because financial systems, by and large, are regulated systems. I think for good reason. I think you want a regulated financial system. That then leads to these companies that are subject to a lot of regulation and therefore slow to innovate. So there's this balance where you've got companies who are trying to innovate, who are not regulated, and they can move faster than the ones that are regulated. And so there's this natural tension between the two. What I see happening over time is a relaxation of the rules that forbid startups to innovate. And I think we're going to have a more open playing field. That said, what will also happen at the same time is probably more regulatory capture from the ones that do get, into the secret room, and then they lock everybody else out. And I think that balance is probably healthy. But the fact that we have this term FinTech, again, I should probably apologize for that too, because I don't think people were talking FinTech. I get invited to talk about FinTech all the time, and I really don't enjoy the space anymore because it's so boring, because the playbook works. And actually, I have a VC firm that just does this. It makes a ton of money. FinTop makes a buttload of money for the principals and the investors running this playbook. We find companies that have to be bought by the big companies, and we invest in them at a $10 million valuation, and we sell them at a $100 million valuation, and oversimplifying terribly, that makes a bunch of money. And it's just, you can predict it, right? Because this company's going to have to get acquired, and they can't make it on their own, and who the acquirer is, and you got to incubate them for 3 years. I mean, rinse and repeat. To me, that's boring. That is a great note to end on. Jim, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you. This has been super fun. And you were so well prepared. I got to give you a prop. I've done a bunch of podcasting. A lot of people, first of all, haven't read the book, or they don't even think. Your questions were thoughtful. And in fact, almost too thoughtful, because the last one stumped me they edited out the 45 seconds of dead silence that I spent trying to come up with a decent answer, which is wonderful. Way to go. Thank you so much. And my one ask for the listeners is, number one, we've obviously talked a lot about the innovation stack. Please, if you listen to my content, you must read this book. It will, I'm not going to say it's going to change your life, but it's going to change your perspective on business.
And my second ask, which is a very close second, is to go onto jimmckelvey.com and please read his blog post, because the first story we went into was just one of the stories, but there are countless other amazing, maybe not as explicit stories, but very, very entertaining, educational, and really insightful stuff. So thank you, Jim.
Thanks. All right.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast, because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.